Hey, see me well. So TUF reviews always get me excited, and after the Prime X670P I just reviewed last week, I needed something to cheer me up, and boy did this do the trick. The TUF is that strange motherboard ASUS likes to experiment on. Many of their new features, the screwless locks, the PCIe opening mechanism, made their debut on a TUF motherboard. And it seems like ASUS engineering team have much more freedom and, to an extent, much more fun on these than on any other motherboard in their lineups. Today, we are reviewing the excellent TUF Gaming X670E-Plus Wi-Fi from ASUS, a board for gamers only, please, focused to be not only obsessively performant, but the most resilient piece of electronic in your build as well. Fun fact for you, powerful and solid was also the name given to my until my early 40s, after which it was affectionately renamed the Escargot. So the TUF is an ASUS lineup of products which orbits around a triple goal: being powerful, being the most resilient components ever, whilst staying affordable. So the TUF products often get stuck between ASUS Prime and the Strix series, which, even though is not always a very comfortable segment to expand in, over the years, TUF has grown a cult-like following and are one of the best ASUS selling components. So yeah, expectations are particularly high, and for this X670/E season to go well for ASUS, they really need to get it right on the TUF. Now, starting with the obvious, we are dealing with an 8 PCB layer motherboard. That is absolutely awesome. These extra 2 layers make a world of difference for the entire motherboard. It improves the signal isolation, crucial for PCIe 4 and 5 handling, the audio isolation, VRM temps diffusion, and most importantly, the overall motherboard lifespan. In short, it changes the entire quality and nature of your motherboard, because 8 PCB layers are only seen on much more premium and expensive motherboard. This is the first time I see it on a TUF motherboard, and a motherboard which is below $400. So my very first gigantic, enormous kudos for ASUS. To ASUS for that. Now, design-wise, the TUF is very loyal to its branding, showing off a very aggressive, militaristic-centric look, which I need to say gets less tacky every year and shows, in my opinion, a little bit better taste. There is a lot of thoughts around the cooling components, and the overall feel of the products is really focused on premium engineering. RGB-wise, we do have a short but bright backlighted TUF logo on the edge of our PCB, which is the right amount of fun if you ask me. But ASUS, being better than I, added 4 RGB connectors, 3 of which are addressable, the whole being Aura compliant, obviously. CPU socket wise, the board is rocking AMD's first LGA socket, featuring no less than 1718 low pressure pins, drastically increasing new gen AMD CPU's bandwidth and allowing both PCIe 5 and DDR5 RAM availability on this motherboard. And looking at AMD's track record, it is safe to say that the AM5 CPU socket will be around for several years and will be supporting more than 2 or even 3 generations of AMD processors. Now, VRM-wise, the TUF X670 has 980 amps worth of power configured in 7+1 paired phases, 840 amps of which are CPU-centric, and enough juice to not only operate but even seriously overclock all of the processors available to us on the Ryzen 7000 series. Now, cooling-wise, the good news is that this motherboard has a serious set of arguments to keep those temps down even in a severe VRM load. First, as I mentioned earlier, we got that 8 PCB layers, which diffuses quite a bit of the VRM heat through the 2 OS copper plates. But mainly, we got these gorgeous, beautiful cooling components. The main block shows a rather large radiating plate and a thick supporting walling to store excess heat. And worth mentioning, the first VRM column shows deep cuts to allow a faster air water exchange, which might seem like a small design feature, but does have a very positive effect on heat transfer rate. As the side block goes, it keeps that cut features and shows off a dense piece of alloy large enough to radiate all the heat excess those power stages have to offer. Finally, both of them have ASUS' very own double contact design, offering a thermal padded contact to both VRM and chokes for a faster heat dissipation. And unsurprisingly, the TUF temps results are exemplary. After running a R9 7900X at 5.3 GHz for over an hour, both side and main blocks stayed below 45 degrees Celsius, which is an absolute gorgeous result, and most importantly is a hallmark of a very long-lasting motherboard. Now, in this context, obviously the TUF VRM fares and grades very well at a solid B+, and I would suggest coupling this board with a 7700X and anything above. Sky is the limit. Now, memory-wise, our TUF board supports up to 128GB of DDR5 RAM organized in a double channel configuration and clockable up to a whopping 6.4 GHz, and that is a lot. And apparently the new go-to clock ASUS has to offer, from anything from budget to premium motherboard, which will be very attractive not only to gamers but anyone who is planning to run memory-centric tasks as well, such as streamers or even content creators. And let me note the fact that in the entire X670 and X670E series, you will not find any motherboard supporting DDR4 RAM, simply because the chipset itself does not support DDR4 RAM. Now, staying in the memory, we have 4 M.2 solid-state drives, one of which is PCIe 5 compliant, allowing data swaps up to a whopping 128 gigabit per second on PCIe 5 compatible sticks. Now that is fast, really fast, and I am so glad to see manufacturers utilizing our PCIe 5 lanes where it matters: storage connectors. Now, in addition, we have 3 other sticks, 2 of which are PCIe 4.0 compatible, which is still plenty fast since they can both swap data up to 64 gigabit per second each. Now, M.2 solid-state drive can get very hot very quickly, and judiciously, ASUS has provided thermo-padded thick and large heat shields for the PCIe 4 and PCIe 5 compliant ones. Now finally, all of our M.2 solid-state drives gets the screwless treatment I like so much. Ever since ASUS came up with it 18 months ago, I've been looking for those on every single board I reviewed, and even though other brands try to reproduce it and copy it, the best, most sturdy, premium screwless mechanism stays and belongs to ASUS, and I'm so glad to sit on absolutely every M.2 solid-state drive connector here. And obviously that means a big storage kudos to ASUS for this. Now, SATA-wise, we do have still and always our 4 loyal Jurassic era SATA 3s, which will do a great job at supporting all of your legacy drives, or making me wonder what I was doing in summer 2009. Now, export-wise, we have 3 export slots, 2 16 slots with different speeds, and a 4 lanes dual slot. As usual, our fastest is the closest to the CPU and provides 16 PCIe 5 lanes, swapping data up to a whopping 64 GB per second. Therefore, this is where you want to place your GPU for optimal performances, hence the metallic reinforcement. The 2 other export slots are both running 4 lanes at a fast PCIe 4 standard for a total of 8 GB per second each, meaning that they could potentially support a second GPU quite decently. Now, definitely was not the intent of the manufacturer here, but I just wanted you to know that. But overall, I do have a regret here. There is no PCIe unlocking mechanism, so definitely something maybe ASUS wants to improve or add on the next iteration of this motherboard. Back I/O wise, first let me note our rather premium back I/O, always a plus, and starting from the left we have an HDMI and DisplayPort for our integrated graphics, which is now available on every Ryzen 7000 series. No more Ryzen G for graphics, and they all have graphics. That's pretty cool. Only took 10 years for AMD to realize that it could be really cool and necessary for... Where did my hand go? Next, we have 4 USB 3.2 second generation plugs going at 10 gigabit per second, including a Type-C. 5 USB 3.2 first generation going at 5 gigabit per second. 1 USB 3.2 second generation double channel, which is a rather complex way to say USB 4 going at 20 gigabit per second. Very happy to see it here. A standard 2.5 gigabit LAN, our dual band Wi-Fi 6E adapter, able to transfer in that cleaner and much faster 6 GHz spectrum. A flashback button, great for CPU less BIOS upgrade. And just so you know, when you receive your TUF, you do want to make a BIOS upgrade right away, because in my case, I could not even post anything. I had to upgrade the BIOS, and that feature really made it, easy and painlessly. And finally, our rather premium S1220A Realtek codec, filtered by no less than 700 ohms worth of capacitors, and that translates into a high recording quality, features that streamers and content creators in particular will like. Overall, our back I/O focuses on getting as much bandwidth in or out of your motherboard as fast as possible, and for a total of 90 gigabit per second to be exact, which is rather premium for a TUF motherboard. So yeah, nothing to complain here. Happy as a bunny. Now, chipset-wise, obviously some changes here. We are going from a single hot 11 watts chipset requiring an active cooling solutions to a 2 7 watts chipset cooled by one massive, really good looking, thick and thermal padded plate. And despite working a little better than its skinnier version we saw on the Prime X670P, I still find the chipset's temperatures on the higher end, especially knowing that I did take these measures on idle. Feature-wise, the X670E expands the board PCIe 5 support to the GPU slot. Probably the only noticeable difference with its cheaper X670 version, which enabled PCIe 5.0 standard only to the CPU linked NVMe. Now, front panel connectors. We have 3 USB second generation front panel connectors, great for monitoring purposes, a 5 gigabit Type A front panel connector as well as a Type C, but most importantly, we have for the very first time on an AMD TUF motherboard, a USB 4.0 connectors able to go up to 40 gigabit worth of data swapping, and that is something I want to see on every single AMD powered motherboard in the known universe. I demand it. Now, cooling wise, we have 8 fan connectors, including 2 water pump connectors, which is exactly what you need to support any type of cooling apparatus, going from simple air to, I don't know, more eccentric dual loop cooling, whatever situation, water stuff. Now, troubleshooting wise, well, we do have our first ADZ debugger, which is really central to know where you are at in your booting process and hint you in the right direction in case of trouble. No QR code, which is usually not here on a TUF motherboard, but hey, I'm allowed to dream. Now, in conclusion, the TUF Gaming X670E-PLUS Wi-Fi will cost you about $330 before taxes, which is a full $120 more than its X570 predecessor, but closer to us $70 more than its Intel counterpart. Now, the whole question is, as usual, is it worth it? Well, in this case, yes. First, we got that 8 PCB layering, which changes the very foundation and nature of your motherboard. We are dealing with an infinitely more stable, sturdy, and long-lasting product than anything in its price range. And by the way, it definitely removes the TUF from the mid-budget quality board and brings it up one serious notch higher on the premium scale, which I just made up. We also have our PCIe 5.0 applied not only on the GPU, which one could argue is not really useful, but on storage as well, which does bring an immediate application to that new standard and day-to-day computing improvements. In a nutshell, well, the TUF puts the bar really high early on in this season, and well, if you're on the market for about the best gaming mid-budget motherboard available, well, there's really nowhere else your money needs and wants to be.